As Jesus traveled Israel with his followers, healing and teaching, people would often ask questions about God and about how to best follow God's ways. Many times, Jesus would use stories to convey what he wanted them to understand. On one occasion, a man who was a religious expert tried to test Jesus. He said he knew that the Jewish law commanded him to love God and love his neighbor. But the man asked Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" So Jesus told the man and those around a story. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A Jewish priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, another Jewish religious leader, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But, Jesus continued, a Samaritan, a group of people the Jews despised, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have." Then, Jesus turned to the religious expert. "Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The expert replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise."
Foot sticking up. Maybe, I hope you're not the robbers. Of all the people of the story, you're not the robbers. You're not taking from those that you're not supposed to take from. Only IRS gets to do that. That's it. For me, it's often the 2 that walked past on the other side. I find myself there more than I want to be, where I find a reason not to help those in need. And really, those reasons are just excuses, right? And we all have them. We have excuses for why we can't help them today. We're in this series called Belief. It's a book series, really, if you're new here. And it concentrates on 3 main areas: how to think like Jesus, act like Jesus, and become like Jesus. We're in the think section. We want to think like Jesus. And one of the ways Jesus thinks is he thinks about others. He has compassion for others. So if you've read the chapter, you know it's all about compassion. The chapter is an optional part of this. Some of us, actually many of us, a lot of the books are gone, there's only a few left, are reading up to this week's lesson and just preparing for it. And you read about compassion this week. And some of it's challenging. Are you compassionate? You know, there's the question. Our key idea, we always have a key idea. The key idea this week is, I believe God calls all Christians, followers of Jesus, to show compassion to people in need. If we truly believe that, if we thought like Jesus, it would just take away all those excuses, right? What kind of excuses? Don't we have them? I mean, excuses like, you know, I got a lot going on and I'm too busy now. And we got excuses like, I don't even know where to begin to help. And, you know, they're probably going to take advantage anyway. And there's programs for that. And, you know, that's really not my thing. But if you showed me my thing, I'd get really fired up and I'd help out there. We have all kinds of excuses. And if we went around the room and each of us shared our excuse, we would just pile them up. So what I thought I would do, because we got to get past these excuses, is talk about them in 3 major piles. Let's just divide them into 3 groupings and talk about excuses so that we can just get past all 3 of them. Here's the problem. When you allow an excuse to hang around long enough, because you've been hurt, because you've been taken advantage of, whatever your excuse is, if you let it hang around long enough, it begins to inform how you behave, so that it is no longer a justifiable excuse in that circumstance. It's just a blanket excuse that becomes your value, which actually devalues people. And the more you have excuses that hang around, the lower your empathy tank goes, or the lower your compassion goes. So you have excuses, I have excuses. Let's just deal with them. Because if we're going to have the heart of Jesus, we have to first of all think like Jesus. And if we're going to think like Jesus, we've got to stop thinking about reasons why we can't help people who are in need. So let's deal with them in their piles. So we pile them up. Let's just deal with them. So the first pile is this. See if this actually rings true for you. I'm too angry to help. Now, maybe anger is too strong a word. But see if you can hear the anger in just some subtle excuses that we've all said. Just subtle ones like, the Bible says you don't work, you don't eat. Or maybe it's an excuse like, I've been wronged before, I've been hurt before, I've been taken advantage of before, I'm not going to be taken advantage of again. We have these excuses that say, well, they're probably going to just take what I give and they're going to sell it and they're going to buy their drugs with it. We have these excuses, right? There's just a bit of anger in there underneath it all. So that's like the pile of angry excuses. I find it interesting that Jesus chose a Samaritan to be the hero of his story. Why? Because Good Samaritan just sounds like a good title, doesn't it? He chose a Samaritan because Jews and Samaritans hate each other. They're enemies of each other. They don't trust each other. They don't like each other. They have nothing. Some people would actually walk all the way around Samaria, which means they'd have to cross the Jordan, walk what they call the Transjordan, over to the other side of the Jordan so that they could, or all the way down the river so they could cross the top of the river and enter into Galilee, completely avoiding Samaria. Jesus chose this hero. He could have chosen anyone. He chose a Samaritan to be his hero, to say, hey, look, here's a man who is angry, because all Jews and Samaritans are angry with each other, feeling like they've been treated unjustly. Here's a man who is angry and yet helps this individual who's in need. Is it possible to be angry and compassionate towards the same person? If compassion is a loving act, is it possible to love and be angry at the same time? A lot of us, we have this compartmentalized thinking where everything has to be divided. You know those people. Raise your hand if you're one of those people that when you get your food on your plate, no food can touch the other food. You know those people, right? Maybe you're one of those people. You can't have a mix, even though it's going to mix in your stomach. You know that, but it doesn't matter. It can't mix because taste buds have to get involved before stomach. We are compartmentalized in our thinking like there's compassion and then there's anger and the two don't mix. We can't have them touch each other. And yet when it comes to our children, don't we mix it all the time? Don't we love them like crazy and they drive us crazy at the same time? Don't we want to give them a great big hug and wring their necks all in the same day? God actually is this way. He sees the things that we do and He doesn't like them. He's angry because of the choices we make, the things we think, the emotions we harbor. He doesn't like them. And yet He finds ways to rescue us and help us and lead us and teach us and train us at the same time. This is the way God is. You probably heard this before, that the God of the Old Testament is nothing like the God of the New Testament. Maybe you've thought that. You say things like, well, in the Old Testament, God is like this ogre. He just has all this wrath, and because of His holiness, He can't stand when people mess up. He has the thou shalt nots, and He gives these laws, and you break the law. He's like a giant deity thumb, and He's looking to squish us. That's how I view God in the Old Testament. But boy, in the New Testament, it's all Jesus, and He's so nice, and He's so sweet, and He's compassionate, right? Don't we get that thinking? That keep the food divided, don't let them mix. God is either a God that is angry or a God who is loving, and yet it's the same God. He can't be anything other than God, so we've got to figure out, what do we have wrong here? In the New Testament, we conveniently forget what happened to Ananias and Sapphira when they lied to the church. And we completely dismiss the last book of the Bible, Revelation, right? Filled with the wrath of God because of the ungodliness. The same thing's true, though, in the Old Testament. God is God. He's the same God. He doesn't change. And in the Old Testament, God who is holy, who can't stand sin, who gets angry because our sin makes him angry, is the same God who has compassion and love, who sent his Son in the New Testament to die on the cross for those very sins. In fact, I love Nehemiah. It's one of my favorite books in the Old Testament. In chapter 9, Nehemiah just gives a retelling of the Israelite history. And as he retells it, he says, yeah, the Israelites refused to listen. They refused to listen to God, and God just took them through the Red Sea. He just took them out of bondage of Egypt. He just was gracious to them, and they refused to listen, began to grumble and complain. Nehemiah says, here's how God responds, because we're looking for the big thumb to come down and squish him, right? Here's how God responds. Nehemiah, right after he shares that, says, but you are a forgiving God, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in love. And then they make this golden calf and say, this is the God who took us out of Egypt. How does God respond to being called a cow? He's the creator of the universe, and now he's being formed into the image of a cow. How does God respond? Because of your great compassion, Nehemiah says, you did not abandon them in the desert. Right after that, he describes when they rebelled against God, God actually gave them over to their enemies, and they were suffering and cried out to God. How did God respond? When they cried out from heaven, you heard them, and in your great compassion, you gave them deliverers who rescued them from the hand of their enemies. Why? Why would God do this? Why is God not the God we kind of pictured of as the ogre who wants to destroy them, the thumb that wants to squish them? Because in your great mercy, you did not put an end to them or abandon them, for you are a gracious and merciful God. This is the God in the Old Testament over and over again. He is holy. He has a standard. He gives every chance. He is wrathful against the wickedness that persists, but he is always looking to save. That's his desire. He wants to help. And if God is this way and he has created us in his image, then we, while we deal with our anger towards a people group or even an individual, can still show compassion when they're in need. So we've got to get past using this excuse as a roadblock and realize that even God is angry at sin and yet finds a way to help those struggling in sin. So I'm too angry to help. Well, you can be angry. Work on it, but you can be angry and still be compassionate. Second group, the second pile, I'm too busy to help. Don't we say that? I'm too busy. You realize that this excuse is probably the number one excuse for just about anything. I'm too busy to do, you fill in the blank, anything. Especially help people in need. You know, when my life balances out, when I get things right, when I'm not so crowded with the calendar, you know, it's just crazy, that calendar, there's just so much I have to do. Some of it is really legitimate. We do have responsibility. Some of it we decide is a priority, but nonetheless, we're busy. We've got all this busyness. Do you think the Samaritan was just, you know, he had all the time in the world? Yeah, I got time today. I was just traveling through a foreign country where people hate me for no apparent reason. He was on schedule to do some kind of business deal, whatever Jesus' motive for him is in the story. But here's what Jesus does set up. He says there's two professionals that came before him that were very busy. The Samaritan's on a business trip. He's busy. The two professionals are busy. By the way, I really don't like the fact that these two professionals are preachers. That really bothers me. I'm going to have to take that up with God, you know, a Levite and a priest. But nonetheless, they have schedules, they have programs, they have things they've got to get done. And they walk on the other side. The Samaritan comes along. He's busy too, but somehow he is able to see the needs greater than my immediate schedule, and he gets busy helping. I'm busy. You're busy. We're all busy. We love to use that excuse because the truth is we are busy. It's not that we're lying. We are, right? I think there is a problem, and it's not busyness. I think it's just a problem with reality we all have. We're just not grasping it. We think that there's this thing called balance out there, and if we could actually attain it, we could then have margin in our life to help somebody in need. So, you know, there's this goal, it's called balance, right? If You ever said that? Man, I need to balance my schedule. I need to balance my time. And if I could do that, then I could do my job and I could serve others. I could manage my family and I could help others. And the problem is balance itself just may not be real, at least not in this lifetime. I think part of heaven is going to be this incredible balance that's going to be beautiful, but maybe it's just not real in this lifetime. I love how Craig Groeschel says it. He says, balance is an illusion. There are certain seasons in life where you are busy doing one thing, and then there are other seasons where you're busy doing something else. For example, in one season of your life, you're busy traveling. Maybe you're new in your career and you have to do a lot of training. You're traveling. Another season of your life, the baby comes along, it's all about the baby. Another season of your life, it's the big project you have to get done. Another season of your life, somebody in your family gets sick and you're in their home a lot. There's just different seasons, and Groeschel says you've got to just be faithful in whatever season you're in. And if we wait until we have all of the things in our life all balanced out, when I retire, that's when I really can help. If you're in this room and you're retired, you would be the first to admit, it's a lie. You're still busy. How about this? On vacation, why don't we take a vacation? We'll go help somebody in need. Have anybody here ever had a vacation in which there wasn't a lot of busyness? Maybe abandoned on an island somewhere in a hut, but I bet you'd find something to do. We are all busy, and we have to get past this idea that, when I'm not so busy, I can help people. God put into His law compassion. A lot of times we think, well, in God's law, He's just telling us what we shouldn't do, but He also tells us what we should do. And when He says we should do, there's a lot of compassion written in. He actually gives us specifics, and what I think is fascinating is He doesn't say, when you have your life balanced out, then you help the poor. When you retire, that's a good time to pick up a ministry. Here's what He says. When you are harvesting in your field, when you're working, when you're building your career, and you overlook a sheaf, that is a stalk of grain, don't go back and get it. Leave it for the alien. That's not little green men, that's actual foreigners. The fatherless and widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. So when you're busy, because we're all busy, find a way to be compassionate towards others. So I'm too angry to help. We got to get past that. We got to get past that. I'm too angry to help. And we got to get past the I'm too busy to help. There's one more pile. If we piled up all our excuses, we could probably put them in. You could probably come up with more piles, but these are just my piles. If you piled them up, you could come up with, or if I came up with a third pile. That's what I'm trying to say. There's a third pile. Here it is. I'm too unmoved to help. I'm too unmoved to help. And those are the kinds of, excuses like, I don't even know what's going on. I'm not even paying attention to the needs around me. I didn't know they needed help. I'm not into it. When I get into it, that's when I'll help. That's not my thing. I have certain gifts and talents, and that particular issue that, you go do. Aren't there other people that there's government agencies that can take care of that? I don't need to. The church has teams, right, that takes care of those things. I don't really need to get involved. There's others that can get involved. Sometimes just throwing money at something is a way to say, I'm really not all that interested in actually showing up or touching them in need, but I'll just throw money at. I'm too unmoved to help. It's a big excuse for a lot of us, isn't it? I just want to wait till I'm passionate about it and I'm on fire for it, and I just want something that stirs me and gets me going. That's my ministry. I'll know when it comes along. I'll know. Do you think that the Good Samaritan was excited when he saw the man lying in the pit with his leg up in the air? Do you think he was excited when he saw that guy? Do you think he said, "Yippee! I get to help someone in need. This is awesome. I'm so excited." And good, he's a Jew. I wanted to show compassion to a Jew. I don't think so. I think it was awkward for him. I think it was uncomfortable. I think it was hard to do. And yet he did it. You ever do anything that you don't get excited about doing just because you know you have to do it? You ever go to the dentist? How many of you go into the dentist going, I can't wait to hear that. That just excites me. That fires me up. Drill away. You got anything bigger? We don't do that, but we go to the dentist because we don't want our teeth to fall out. We like to keep them. So, you're not moved, you're not excited about it, but it still needs to happen because there's a need in front of you. Do you think Jesus was excited about the cross? Do you think he went up and, hey, this is great, I'm so excited? I know there's passages where he says, I've looked forward to this, but he's talking about the outcome of the cross, right? There's this passage right here where it says in Hebrews, let us fix our eyes on Jesus. There's no one else we should be focused on. The author, this is his idea, and perfecter, he did it on the cross of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. Sometimes we read a passage like that and we think, wow, Jesus was excited about the cross. Yippee, I get to go to the cross. No, it's for what the cross accomplishes that he went to the cross. He endured the cross, which is suffering for the joy that would happen. And it's the joy that he experiences because he is able to help us. There's joy in that. But the joy that we experience because we receive forgiveness and we receive new life. There's this word that the early church came up with for what Jesus went through when he went to the cross, and it's passion. Passion. And oftentimes we read something like that for, like the movie, The Passion of the Christ, and we read that word and we think, wow, I didn't realize Jesus was all that excited about going to the cross, that passion. I didn't realize that Jesus, just like a little kid, could not wait till Christmas morning, kind of, yes. And in fact, we get it all wrong when we think that way, because the Latin word they chose for passion, this is what the early church chose, passion. That Jesus, we call it the Passion Week, his going to the cross and suffering and dying for us. The Latin word for passion does not mean elated and excited and good feelings and tingly. It simply means to suffer. And at first we look at that and we say, that doesn't make sense, Jeff. Passion to suffer. Do I really feel suffering when I am excited about something or when I have passion for something? Actually, if you understood the term, yes, you do feel suffering, because here's what happens. You get passionate about something, whatever your cause is, you get fired up about it, and there's many in this room that have your thing that you're really passionate about. You really get fired up. Here's the deal. You will reorganize your priorities to get that thing done. You will expend energy and time and thoughts and money on whatever. You will give up stuff in order for that to happen. You will suffer for the cause to set the oppressed free and to help the poor, if that is what you're passionate about. You realize that the Good Samaritan didn't have the feeling of joy helping the man. He had actually pity, which is a feeling of suffering for the man. Passion. That's why the proverb writer can say, and he says it several times in different ways, a generous man will prosper. And it just confuses us at first, because if he's giving away all his money, how's he going to prosper? That doesn't make sense to us. What kind of banking system is this? But he goes on and explains, he who refreshes others himself will be refreshed. So if you bring life and you bring joy and you bring peace and you bring answers and you set the oppressed free, you find relief in your own life. That's the way it works. When Jesus put his eyes on the cross, he endured it. He suffered for the joy that would be accomplished afterwards through it. And that's why when we talk about this word compassion, we have to understand compassion is one of those emotions that is not, or one of those actions, or one of those feelings, or one of those thoughts, a lot like love, that has a lot of sides to it. And it's hard to explain and hard to put in a box, but what we do know, at least, is that in it is passion, and that means to suffer. So compassion means that we need to come alongside those who are suffering and suffer with them, so that we set the oppressed free and we help out the poor, whether we're all fired up about it or not. If it's something that we can empathize with, that would hurt me to go through that. That would tear my family apart to go through that. That would ruin me. Then walk alongside them and help them out. That's compassion. So we need to figure out a way to help, even if anger still hangs around. We need to find a way to help, even if our life isn't totally in balance, because it's never going to be totally in balance. We need to find a way to help out, even if we don't feel like it, because they're in need. It's not about us. They need us to suffer a little inconvenience for them. Now, we've been talking about thinking like Jesus. We can't just think like Jesus, though. We have to become like Jesus. And to become like Jesus, we have to actually do something. Jesus didn't just think compassionately. He was compassionate. That's why I love James when he says, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Who is it that you need to suffer for, or suffer with? Who is it in your life that needs compassion? Many years ago, my wife taught me something because I have been really burned over the years in being taken advantage of. The last church that I was at, I was in a parsonage right next door. Beautiful. You just imagine the most beautiful white church surrounded by a seminary, and then there's a parsonage right next door. So the cemetery surrounds us as well. We had the most quiet neighbors. It was awesome. Everything about that was actually absolutely picture perfect except our proximity to the church, because everybody knew it was a parsonage, pulled up into our driveway, knocked at all hours of the night and wanted help and wanted need. And we listened to stories. And we were taken advantage of at times, and we did, after that, we learned our lesson, and we started to investigate each of their stories, and we were able to find who was lying and who was really in need. And we were able to help some, but it really hurt me here because it dulled my compassion for people. And I don't know if you're like me, but when I see the guy holding the cardboard sign on the side of the road, I get really uncomfortable because my first feelings, my first thoughts are very skeptical instead of compassionate. My wife helped me years ago to find ways to love those who may or may not be taking advantage of us. Be wise in how you do it, but you still love them because it's between them and God. We're not responsible for how they act. We just have to be right, even if they're not. Show them grace. Err on the side of grace. And so she would buy these granola bars and just keep them in her car so that whenever there's somebody that's in need, she doesn't know if they're going to take advantage of her or not, but at least she can be loving towards that individual and give them a box. If they're truly hungry, they will devour that box. So I started doing the same thing, and it really frustrates me when I pull up and there's the guy there and I'm reaching behind my seat. Oh, my kids ate my granola bars again. It happens. It's actually good because, they do go stale. You don't want to give a box of stale granola bars to somebody. Just find a way to be compassionate. Anyway, yeah, you've got to be wise. You don't throw money at them. Besides, is that real compassion or is that just to get rid of them? Why not take them somewhere to eat? And if they don't want to go with you, then they really aren't hungry. Just find a way. By the way, if you want to do the granola bar thing, I recommend you don't do chocolate-covered granola bars. Just saying from experience. James says, last verse, if one of you says to him, go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about his physical needs, what good is it? We need to do something. So decide right now what you're going to do. Because if you don't decide right now what you're going to do next time you come face to face with someone in need, you're going to revert to your excuses because your excuses are what inform your decisions if you let them hang around too long. So change what you believe. It all starts with thinking like Jesus. Be compassionate to those in need and those who are suffering injustice. Now, maybe you're the guy that's lying in the pit with his foot up in the air because you've been through a lot in this life and you feel broken, you feel empty, you feel hurt, you feel alone. I just want to share with you, just to change the analogy a little, I just want to share with you a little bit of the good news, and that is Jesus Christ, who ruled all of heaven, stepped off his throne because he saw your need. And he came down here and suffered in your place. That's what the cross is all about. So he is, in a sense, the Good Samaritan. And he has come to help you. He's come to bandage your wounds. He's come to put you back together. He's come to heal you. Not just physical, not just financial, more than that. Your spiritual need. your spiritual brokenness. So, if you've never accepted Jesus, if you've never surrendered your life to Him, just imagine that you're all broken and your foot's up in the air and you're lying on the side of the road. I can't get that cartoon figure out of my head. And Jesus walks up and He bends down and He begins to touch you and bandage you and show you love, and is willing to put everything on His credit card so that you can have eternity with Him. Just imagine you lying there and you saying to Him, "Oh, no, I'm good. No, don't worry about me. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm bleeding, but it'll stop, and maybe I'll feel better to get up later." Why don't you just let Jesus rescue you? Why don't you just surrender your life to Him today? Just lay yourself down. I'm going to ask that you stand. I'm going to pray. The worship team is going to sing. This is your time to respond. If you've never surrendered to Jesus, why not do so right now? Father God, this is not an easy topic for us because we've been burned, we've been hurt before. We don't know sometimes even how to warm up the heart, because it's just easier to live in our excuses than to live in grace. But we want to live in grace. You've died for us and given us everything. We have really no excuse. And so we're asking you to raise our compassion as we drop the excuses. As we work through anger, help us to still serve. As we work through our busyness, help us to still serve. As we work through just being unmoved, help us to still serve. God, for those that need to just accept your free gift of the cross, to be picked up again, to be put right, to be restored, I pray that they will surrender themselves to you right now. We ask for this in Jesus' name. Amen. Come as we